Welcome back to the Ikario podcast, to a brand new episode.
Bro, come on.
All right, fine. So today,
how am I supposed to keep a straight face when you do that unannounced, dude?
the reason I'm trying to keep it a bit lighthearted is because today we're talking about the struggle. The struggle that happens or that takes place while you're pursuing your, ultimate goals, life goals and whatnot. And Shane, you just asked me, where did this come from? Oh, this came from the recent audience survey that we did. We asked people in our audience, right? What are your top 2 questions about productivity and success? And while there were some absolutely fantastic questions there, we answered all of them. They're in YouTube. I'll put the links to those videos in the description box below. One of the general sentiments that came up was that, man, this is like kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I barely have time for anything. I feel guilty. I'm not spending time with my kids and whatnot. So one common goal that most of our audience has is this financial freedom aspect, right? And that could mean anything to them. But the reason I phrase it that way is because you've achieved that. And so what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. And I mean, also to clarify, right, most of the people sending in these questions are basically doing something entrepreneurial or creative, right, to try and create their own income. And it did strike me that sometimes someone will ask a question which is like, I think I'm doing this wrong. It's so hard and there's so many problems and so on. But I'm just like, maybe this is just normal. Because, I mean, my experience was very much like that, right? Even if you think about it, sometimes when people ask me like, oh, when did you start as an entrepreneur? I'm not sure how to answer it, because before I started what I now think of as like my first real business, I was like doing all kinds of stuff, like trying to be an entrepreneur. That at the time I was like, yeah, I'm doing it, right? Whereas now looking back, it's like I wasn't even trying, but or there was like no chance of any of that succeeding, right?
Right.
But I didn't have enough information. I didn't know enough to understand that what I was doing wasn't really, going anywhere. So even there, in terms of the struggle, there were like a couple of years where I was like, even just forming the idea, I was like, oh, I could build my own business somehow, and just trying to get to grips with the very basics of what does that even mean? Right. How do I even do that? And I remember, making some very, very weak attempts at starting something where I can't even say I tried to start a business, right? It failed so early in the process. But in a way, the reason I'm saying all this is that this is part of the struggle, There I was struggling at such a low level of experience and information that you can't even really call it entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah. And one thing you've said to me, I think you've said it twice now, that really gets me every time is like, you have failed more times in your life than most people will ever try.
Yeah. And I mean, I honestly believe that's true, because even within the businesses I started, so any successful business you've ever seen me associated with, and probably some you haven't seen me associated with, were like the winners out of a whole bunch of projects, right?
Right.
So, and just to give an example of what I mean by that, before I started Thrive Themes, which is the company most people like know me for because it's the most successful one I started, which is a software company. At some point, I was like, I'm not a software developer, by the way, right? So I can't write code myself. So at some point, I was like, okay, I have these ideas and I want to try to build software, and I think there's an opportunity here. How do I do that? How does one, as a non-developer, make software happen, basically? And up until that point, I had mostly just done everything myself. I'd mostly been a solopreneur, building websites and doing stuff like that. And so then it's like, okay, somehow I have to write some kind of a specification document for what I want from this software, right? I have to find someone to hire. I have to work with like developers and designers and all this kind of stuff. How does one do all that? No idea, right? And I don't know the exact number, but I would say that before Thrive Themes, there was probably like 7 software products that I started, 3 or 4 of which ever saw the light of day. So right away, there's like 3 that never made it out of production, right? 3 where it's like, I work with some developer for a while, it's a disaster, I basically give up on it, right?
Right.
And then out of the ones that we published, there was at least one that generated like 0 sales. Okay, where like we made the software, we built the website, we did all the stuff, right, and just no one buys it. And then there were some that did okay, and everything in between. But like this is right to arrive at something like Thrive Themes. There's so many failed attempts that you've never seen. And to arrive at those failed attempts, there's failed attempts at other stuff that you've never seen.
Right.
It's like, because, okay, for a while I was earning money from these like websites that I was doing SEO for and whatnot. But, for, I don't know, 4 or 5 websites that were making me money, there were like 10 that weren't. And then even within that, or even within something like Thrive Themes, marketing campaigns that failed, new products or features that bombed, whatever, like advertising campaigns that failed, even things like, again, there's lots of invisible and internal struggle and failure, where you go, okay, here's a new thing we're going to try. We're going to try this workflow with this team, total disaster, right? Going to hire this person, he's going to help us solve this, disaster, and so on and so forth, right? It's like I have completely lost count of the amount of things I have tried and failed at. And I think it's just so easy to not see that, it's so easy to not see that, even though I always try to emphasize that. I sometimes get this impression that people who know me as like, oh, the entrepreneur Thrive Themes guy are like, oh my God, this guy who, Midas touch, right? Everything I do turns to gold. It's like, no, it's really not like that. It's very weird when people look at me like that, right? Because I know the real story.
Right.
And so I really try to emphasize that, and I try to tell the story of failures repeatedly and things like that. Because it's just so easy to miss, and it just creates a completely false image. If you somehow think that at some point I decided, oh, I'm gonna start a company, and then I started Thrive Themes and it made lots of money. It's like, no, it really wasn't anything like that.
Yeah. It reminds me of the thing you were saying about, successful people are no different than you. They've just been on the path longer and probably been trying a lot longer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And one thing I want to just quickly highlight. So you mentioned how you don't know programming, right? You're not a coder by trade, but you started 7 software businesses.
Yeah.
Right? Usually what's the thing? Oh, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think you ever knew how to do this, and you still tried 7 times or whatever the case was.
Yeah, and even, look, another thing to see as well is like, it took me a while. The first businesses I tried to start were offline businesses. And this is in the earlier days of the internet, right?
Right.
Where online business was a relatively new thing. Like the internet had already been around for a while, but it was still a pretty new phenomenon for like, oh, there's an online store and stuff like that, right? And it took me quite a long time to move to online stuff, because one of the problems I had is like, I don't know how to build a website, right? And this is like complicated and technical. And also at the time I had, which is a different story, but it's like I had pretty low self-esteem. And so I was someone who was prone to thinking, oh, this seems complicated, I probably can't figure this out, right? I didn't yet have the mindset, it's like, oh, this might be difficult, but I'm sure I can figure it out.
Right.
At the time I was like, I don't know how to do this, so I probably can never do it because I'm not good at things, right? And so that kept me from even trying to build a website for a long time. But ultimately, there's maybe 5 years of time between me, typing how to build a website into a search engine and me being the guy who has the website building software company,
Wow. You solved your own problem.
It's true. Yeah, I did solve my own problem. But yeah, I think that's also something that people just underestimate. It's like, yeah, of course, I had to learn all of this stuff from scratch, and I was really, really bad at it for a long time,
Right. Okay. So it's fair to say it wasn't always sunshine and roses, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so I think the point I'm trying to get across is that just because it's a struggle and it seems to be going slow and you're not making progress and stuff doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. And it's always good to question that, right? It's always good to ask yourself, hold on, is there something I'm not doing right? Is there something I can optimize and so on? That's important to do, absolutely. But I also just kind of want to tell this side of the story where it's like, look, that can be, you might be in the middle of your success story while you're going, oh my God, this is terrible. How am I ever going to figure this out? Right.
Right.
Because while it's happening, it can be hard. It can be hard to tell. And another phenomenon that I have mentioned previously, but that's worth reiterating, is that for all of the entrepreneurial stuff that I've done, it has always felt like in the moment, it has always felt like we're moving way too slow, right? So, you do an end of year review and you're like, damn, we've only reached like half of our goals, if that. And there's all this stuff I wanted to do and all this other stuff that we still haven't gotten to. It feels like we're just not getting anywhere. Right. But the strange thing is, you then look back 5 years and you're like, hold on. In the 5 years where each year it felt like we're moving way too slow, we went from 0 to this, now it's like a team of 90 people and all this kind of stuff, right?
Wow.
And it's a weird phenomenon where in the moment, right, it feels very hard. So again, like you have to give yourself the time. You have to give yourself the time to be able to look back on a longer period, right? And another phenomenon related to that, it's like this kind of thing where you just can't see your own growth, right?
Okay, so just because you're struggling and you're not seeing progress, or it's so slow you can't see it, right? It's like your nails growing. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you don't feel it or actively see it, but at some point you're like, oh God, I gotta cut my nails.
Exactly.
My hair.
Yeah, it really is like that. Yeah.
So just because you're going through that experience does not mean that you're necessarily doing something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And one of the, I guess, phenomenons, or one of the common traits that I've seen in like the people we've worked with so far, right? It's like a shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Like you're doing something, well, this is clearly not working. Let me completely ditch this and start from absolute scratch, something else, because that might work faster.
Yeah. And I think this is where an obstacle here that leads people to this. I mean, on the one hand, it's that shiny objects are appealing and you get this kind of instant gratification, right? If you come across, I don't know, someone says, hey, here's the Amazon dropshipping course. It's going to make you rich overnight. You get some instant gratification out of being like, oh, this is what I'm going to buy this, and this is what I'm going to do. Oh, I'm going to be rich so soon, right? That feels good. And then, of course, as you get into it, it turns out that it's not that easy, and then the person was lying and all that. And then the next thing comes along, and it can even be, it doesn't have to be an outright scam, but it can even be like, oh, buy this software. It's going to help you optimize whatever, right?
Yeah.
This keyword software is going to help you find the right keywords, and then you make all this money. So you buy the thing. Again, you get kind of an instant gratification of I bought a thing, is a new thing, right? Or, oh, I'm going to get a new project management thing. I'm going to change from Trello to Notion, or from Notion to Asana, or from whatever, right? And you get that kind of, again, that's a shiny object where you're going, oh, I'm currently not doing the thing I'm supposed to do because I'm restructuring my work thingy from one piece, from one task manager to another. You get some kind of a satisfaction out of doing these things. And that's just inherently appealing. It's just how it is, right? So you have to kind of resist that urge. But the other thing, I think, why this can happen is that we get a really wrong picture of what success looks like. And that has a lot to do with like marketing and also storytelling and stuff, right? Because generally you always hear the outliers. And when it comes to marketing, obviously that makes sense. And, we do that too. Basically, everybody who sells something does that. If you sell a product that promises some kind of a benefit, who are you going to highlight? You're going to highlight the people among your customers who got the best results, right? Yeah. The best story is the story you tell. Obviously, like, why would you not tell that story, right? So in a way, it doesn't even have to be deceptive. But it just creates this distorted view and it can be anything, right? It can be like, oh, here's this, this supplement, right? The testimonials, the stories they're going to tell are going to be people who are like, oh my God, I was, terrible. I was falling apart literally. And then I started taking the supplement and now I feel so good. Right. They're not going to display the stories of people who are like, yeah, I felt okay before I took it. Didn't really make a difference. Right?
I think I'm better, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So that's one part, right? That can give you a skewed expectation of what's really going on. Yeah. I think this is one of the reasons why sometimes people struggle a little bit with like science and like scientific research, because in advertising, you'll always hear like, oh, again, like take this supplement, right? Take this omega-3 or whatever, and it's instantly going to double your IQ or something.
Right.
A scientific study will be like, oh, yeah, we found a really profound effect in 34% of the participants. We measured a 1.5% increase in something, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, that's actually not that exciting, is it, right?
Not really.
But like, that's what reality looks like, unfortunately. Usually, effect sizes are pretty small. And this is one of the things that can be kind of frustrating about going through actual research is like everything seems so insignificant, right? Compared to the promises being made in other places.
Yeah. And just to add to your point, like the thing you're mentioning about the testimonials, right? Like, why do they work? Number one, it shows social proof that so many people have tried. And the other factor is like the I can do it too factor.
Yeah.
And like the social proof just adds to it. Like, oh, if it worked for hundreds of people, I'm just another one, right? And the other thing is like, we also want to identify ourselves in the best possible story, right?
Of course,
like, we want to see ourselves as the hero. Like,
yeah, of course. You don't want to think, oh, I'm probably going to get like an average result.
Like, what's the book? StoryBrand by Donald Miller, right? Like that entire marketing strategy is based off telling the story. And like, for example, you already mentioned it, like buying courses, right? That's why they work. They know how to exploit what we want and sell it to us the best possible way.
Yeah.
Right. Now I don't know if there's any quote unquote wrong here, or are you wrong for buying the thing, or are they wrong for selling it? I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah, no, I think it's just, basically the problem. It's good to be aware of this, right? And kind of adjust your expectations.
Right.
Because, and also to be clear, in some cases it is just fully deceptive. It's just you're just being lied to, right? And they're making up numbers, they're doctoring screenshots, they're photoshopping before and after pictures. They're just lying to you, right?
Right.
That happens a lot too. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
But I think I almost I kind of jumped the gun on this because that happens a lot. You're simply being lied to. But even outside the world of deception, even a completely honest business will essentially deceive you a little bit because they're just telling the best stories, right? And to be honest, look, even if they told all the stories, you would read the best ones.
You would read the best ones,
right?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So, okay. So that's part of the problem. Another big part of the problem is just a survivorship bias, which is to say that, or it's a form of survivorship bias, really. So basically, if you have, again, lots of people start businesses and most of those businesses fail. And we will hear stories from the people who usually like achieve the most remarkable success, often the most remarkable success in the least time, because that makes the best story.
Right.
And so again, that gives you, on the one hand, it can give you a skewed idea of what it takes. You ask the CEO who, the overnight success CEO, like, oh, what does it take to succeed? And he says, oh, I visualized my goals every day or something. Well, maybe the guys who failed did that too. You don't know. We're not interviewing them, right?
Right.
So it can give you a false sense of what it actually takes to succeed. But I think more importantly, for the context of what we're talking about, because we were telling the best stories, in the media, again, you will get this idea that, oh, this must be what it's like, This guy started a business and now he's super rich and it didn't take very long. And even if the story is this guy started a business, he struggled for many years and now he's rich, you almost kind of edit out the middle part,
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, he struggled for a few years, whatever, but now he's super rich. I want that. Right?
Yeah. It's like in movies, right? Like when they show the guy going from out of shape to
Yeah,
shape,
yeah,
like the
it's just a
montage.
montage. Yeah, I actually love montages. They should do them more.
Yeah. Except the montage is like years long.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It doesn't actually translate the amount of effort that goes into it very well. So all of this is to say that there's almost, I don't know if there's any way to not suffer from this fallacy, essentially. We all have kind of the wrong expectations. We're all taken by surprise by the struggle when it hits us, right? So I'm not necessarily saying, oh, you should do something differently to solve this. I'm just saying, hey, be aware of this. Be aware of this. And I think, in fact, the struggle can be a good sign, because, of course, you do have to, you were mentioning this before, sometimes you do have to know when to cut your losses, right? there's no point in, like, if you're getting a clear signal that something doesn't work, don't just keep doing more of it.
And that's sunk cost fallacy right there. Yeah.
That's another fallacy that can hit you. Yeah. But on the other hand, and look, and this is one of the entrepreneurial challenges. How do you know when and what to quit? How do you find the balance? Because it's really not just one or the other. It's the solution isn't to just pick one thing and then persevere forever, right?
Yeah.
But the solution is also not to bounce from one thing to the other. That's like the shiny object syndrome, right? That's also not going to work. And this is unfortunately one of the things you have to wrestle with, right? There's no guaranteed formula here to always make the right choice between those two things. That's something you have to wrestle with. And if you find yourself in that struggle where you go, damn, I tried the thing, I worked really hard on it, I decided this is not going to work, I pivoted in some way, and now I'm solving all these other problems. Oh my God, it's so difficult. I'm struggling. It's like, that's actually a sign that you're doing the work, right?
Yeah. You're doing it right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And transferring the lessons over.
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally. Yeah. So if you find yourself not struggling, there's probably a worse sign, right? Like if it's mundane, right? If you haven't reached the level of success that you want. So if you're kind of working away at a business, it's not making money yet, and you're not in a struggle, you don't feel like you're crawling through mud every day, that's probably not a good sign, right? This probably means that you're not doing enough, because really the struggle was really hard for me for many years. And again, I'm not saying that that's the exact experience everyone else will have. I'm just saying that in my case, that was very much part of my reality. There was many years of a lot of struggle, and that did eventually translate into success. And oftentimes there was a very strong correlation between like how hard I was suffering in a way, and how much of a result I got at the end, right? The most successful businesses are the ones that took most of my time and energy, where I really had to overcome some very serious obstacles. Because again, that's often a sign of growth. It's like, look, I'm now struggling with, in the past, maybe this, again, if we kind of rewind the clock to some point in my development, right? You would see me struggling away at something where it's like, okay, 3 years earlier, I was struggling with how the hell do I make a website?
Right.
Now, I'm not making websites anymore. I'm like, how the hell do I hire people and do this kind of stuff? Well, that's a bigger challenge. This is harder to do than building a website, all right? So the amount of struggle, the amount of suffering has increased. But that's a good sign.
Right.
Because I'm struggling with harder, higher level problems now, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, these are leveled up problems.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you, right? I'm going to throw a wrench in here.
Okay.
So we just talked about shiny object syndrome, and then knowing when to cut your losses, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the first things I ever learned from you was that most people are not strong finishers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh shit, that was so true. I mean, I still struggle with this. So the concept is, actually, why don't you explain it? It's your concept.
Yeah. So most people are strong starters, right?
Yeah.
And there's not, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but there's not much merit in being a strong starter, right? There's not much merit in being someone who's like, oh, I'm super excited about starting this new thing. But most people are weak finishers. So most people have a lot of half-started projects, or a bunch of ideas, right, that you've never really done, or you've put in maybe a few hours of work here, or even actually more tragically, you've put in like 6 months of work, but you never launched the thing, right?
Or dragged it to completion, yeah.
Yeah. Now, so you want to be a strong finisher.
Yeah.
But this is an important thing, right? The emphasis here is on finishing, okay?
Right.
It's not endlessly persevering.
Okay.
Because the way a lot of people fail is abandoning stuff too soon, or endlessly churning on something without getting it to a finish line state. And so, to give you an example of from the software examples I gave, right? Yes, there are some that I abandoned like before they were ever finished. And to explain the reasoning there, it was like, this costs money and time. And it was like, I've started this project. I'm working with, some agency or some developer or whatever. I've already spent a bunch of money on it. And I'm at a point where it's like, oh, the state of this thing is really bad. I would have to invest lots more money and lots more time to finish this. But the work with this developer is just going so poorly, or this agency, they're just so bad to work with that really I'd have to scrap the whole thing, start from scratch. So now the decision becomes, should I do that? Do I basically shut this down? Or it's actually two decisions. The first decision is I need to shut this down, right? This is a waste of, like, working with this agency on this project with the way I've tried to do it is a waste of money and time. I could lose all of my money trying to finish it over here. So I have to shut this down. Then the second decision becomes, should I start the same thing up elsewhere? Right? And in some cases, I made the decision, no. Because I was also doing some of these things in parallel. So I was just like, no, this is not worth it. There's something more promising over here. And I'm just going to shutter this and focus on something else, right? But that is an example of not finishing. I'm just explaining my logic.
Right.
I'm not just going, I guess I don't want to anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
You're kind of touching on what my question was going to be, which was, so how do you discern between what is a roadblock and what's a dead end?
Yeah.
Right. So you kind of just described that.
Again, there's no recipe for this, right? But you have to determine that. But look, this is also why I emphasize the idea that your job is to ship. And especially early on in whatever you do, you should be publishing, you should be finishing and publishing things often, right? So, and this is also what I did with software, right? The first software products I developed were small ones that we could finish in the span of a few weeks or months.
Right.
Because I wanted to ship often and early. I wanted to get the experience of doing this before taking on something bigger. Now, and so being a strong finisher includes getting to the finish line in a reasonable amount of time. That's really important, right? There's a really important distinction between being someone who just keeps going, keeps fighting, versus being someone who finishes the next thing and finishes the next thing, right? And I think in many cases, it is a very good idea to practice on like small scope things, okay? Which is to say that, if you want to be a writer, the first thing you start writing probably shouldn't be a book. It should probably be an article,
right.
A blog post, right? Which, by the way, is how lots and lots of writers start like that. They're a journalist for a few years. Maybe they write some short stories, then they write a novel, right? It's pretty rare that someone's just like, hey, the first paragraph I ever wrote was the first paragraph of my novel, right? So that's an example of like you're finishing things. You finish this article, finish this article, finish this article, finish this article, finish the short story, and so on. So you already have built up the skill and you're already a strong finisher, and now you can take on the bigger project. And the same is true with online businesses, right? It's like start with something that has a relatively small scope, something where you can ship that first version of it, ship the minimum viable product, if you will, and finish it. Don't give up on it until you finished it, because ideally, look, if you're coming to me saying, I've been struggling on this for years, should I prioritize being a finisher or what? It's like, you're already fucked up.
Yeah.
Why are you doing something? Why is the first thing you do something that allows you to struggle for years on it, right? Finish something sooner than that.
Yeah, because that's a trap that you can fall into, right? Oh, no, I'm building the perfect product. Like, no, minimum viable product. Ship it, see what happens. Okay, so I can understand why there's a resistance to that, right? Because you put your work out there. At that point, you're not putting your work out there. You're putting yourself out there. And when nobody likes it, it's like, oh no, I'm a bad person.
But you have to be bad at things in order to be later good at them, right?
Yeah.
There's just no way around
like
it.
the article example you gave, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, the skill you're actively cultivating is finishing, but the background skill that's being built up is your writing.
Exactly. And it's the same as an entrepreneur. Look, you have to, in fact, I would suggest that you should develop the ambition to be someone who cringes when you look back at your previous work. Okay.
Oh, is that a sign you're doing it right?
Yes.
Oh,
because look, I have, and in a way, thankfully, a pretty significant chunk of my body of work has disappeared, right? Because I got one of my YouTube channels banned at one point with some of my earliest work on it, right? A bunch of the websites I had, I didn't continue paying for the hosting. They're not around anymore. But listen, there are let's say if that hadn't happened, right? If everything was still online, and maybe it still is, maybe you can go to archive.org or something, right? There are literally hundreds of pieces of writing from me. There are hundreds of videos from me that are garbage, okay? They're really, really bad. And yeah, and it's a good thing. Wouldn't it be worse if I went back and looked at an article I wrote 10 years ago and be like, I still can't do better than this? That would be a pretty bad sign, wouldn't it? And also as an entrepreneur, listen, my first sales page was not a great sales page. My first product idea was not a great product idea. And so on, right? Yeah. I aspire to be someone. I want to continue being able to look back at my previous work and be like, well, this was not very good.
Yeah. Okay, the thing you're saying, like, I think logically we all understand it, right? But emotionally, we still want, like, whatever end state that's going to be. We still want that, like, sooner.
Yeah.
Ideally now, but, like, still sooner.
I know. Listen, I don't know what the solution is. I'm going to, let me address the men in the audience here. Don't be such a pussy, okay? Like, can you please get over yourself and just do the fucking thing? Like, what do you want? You need someone to give you a fucking foot massage and like a, I don't know, positive reinforcement or something? Fucking do it. Like, do the thing, suck at it, and then keep doing it. Like, shut up with your whining, basically. I don't know if this applies to women as well. I probably can't talk to women like that without getting canceled or something. So this was only addressed to the men. The women, you're on your own. I'm sorry. Can I help you?
I mean, just take the lesson from that, right?
Yeah, I don't honestly, I don't know, but I feel like at least I know that sometimes to men you can appeal like this, right? Yeah. Where it's just like, dude, what are you doing? What is this? Why are you whining about fucking writing a blog post? Just do it, man.
And in a more formal sense of the way, what you're saying is embrace stoicism.
Yeah, I'm very stoic about this right now.
I mean, that's what you're saying.
As Seneca said, get your shit together, pussy. I'm pretty sure we can do like a poster with a Seneca statue.
Oh, God. That's pure gold.
Anyway, okay. Sorry about everyone I've just offended.
Nah, I don't think you offended anyone. I mean, by the way, one thing with, if you feel angry, it's because it's true. That's what I believe, at least.
Yeah.
When I get critical feedback, I'm like, how the fuck you say that to me? I'm like, he's right. Let me go figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the ego thing. But anyway, so, okay. For guys, we're saying, get over yourself. Like, this is like it's essentially growing pains, right? Even if you're not growing or not, if progress is there or not, you're still, okay. So this is what I'm thinking. There must be something that is progressing. So if it's not like, let's say I'm trying to build a business and no matter what I do for the last 6 months, it's just not budging.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is like leading versus lagging indicators, right? So lagging indicator would be, is my business making thousands and thousands of dollars?
Yeah. How much money is it making?
So what would be the leading indicator to focus on? Because there is an element of like keeping yourself motivated as well, right?
Yeah.
Like somehow, like, yeah, you can go into the whatever dark or warrior energy, but like, let's go.
Yeah.
Which is fun. But also you don't want to always be that guy who's like crazy intense. And people are like, yo, stay away.
And you want to be winning, right? It's important to generate wins to get a sense that you're going in the right direction. I mean, the question is like, what are you getting better at? Or that's the question I always ask myself. What am I getting better at? So even if if I don't know, let's say I'm publishing articles, nobody's reading them, right? Which is basically normal when you start publishing articles. But the question is, what am I getting better at? What am I deliberately working on? And so it could be anything. It could be just, basically you want to have something where you say, I want to get better at explaining what I mean clearly. And then it's something where you're doing like some active learning and implementing, right? Where it's like, so you maybe read a book about, on writing well or something like that, right? It's like, oh, okay, I should have clearer structure. That's one of the ways I can communicate better. So in my next article, I'm going to try to have a better structure, right? And then you keep doing, you practice that several times that you can look at, okay, article number 10, how is it structured compared to article number 1? Am I getting better? Yes, good. Okay, now what can I improve? Maybe I have to have more of a storytelling element. Maybe I want to make my writing more humorous or more whatever. you have to have a clear sense of what am I getting better at,
Right.
so that you're not just banging your head against the wall, right? That's one way to suffer. But ideally, you're suffering because you're putting in the work and growing your skills.
Yeah. And another thing that comes to mind is that if the only motivator is the end result, then why are you engaging in the process? Right?
I mean,
if the process is not fun.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of people struggle.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I just want to make money. Let me do Amazon store, sure. Fucking drop shipping, Shopify, it doesn't matter, right?
Exactly. And then you find out that running an e-commerce business isn't fun, right?
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it can be fun. I know people who are into that, right? I know people who are into like, I increased our margin by 0.5% by optimizing blah, 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 right? Cool. Good for you, right?
The ads part is a lot of fun, but the customer support. Oh
right. Yeah. But you have to have something that you're doing. But again, you want to be engaged in something. You basically want to be engaged in something that feels good to you in the sense that you want to get better at it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I want to get better at sales. Look, getting better at sales is very lucrative and horrible.
Yeah.
Right?
Super hard.
Get ready to get rejected 17,000 times, right?
A day.
Yeah. So, but if it has to feel worthwhile to you, where you're like, I want to get better at this. And I think that a big part here is basically role models. You know, I think often it's a better motivator to be like, I want to be like this person instead of I want to have this money. I think just I want to have more money is often a pretty weak motivator. But if there's someone in your life where you're like, you know, here's just this badass entrepreneur and I want to be like that, I think that usually, or for me, that's something that works for me much better if I can role model someone.
Okay. So how do you solve is dichotomy the right word? Because obviously it would be untruthful of me, or I'd be lying if I said I'm not motivated by money, right? And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people, practically everybody, right? But at the same time, like I do logically understand that if you're only chasing the money, or if I'm only chasing the money, then I'm probably going to be miserable the whole time, or I'm not going to enjoy what I'm doing. So chase like enjoyment and engagement in what you're doing, but then also worry about the money, or like be mindful of it.
The way I do it is because I do want more money, but I don't want to be pursuing money. So what I do instead is I pursue things the way I pursue things is I want to be the kind of person who ... right? And I make sure that those things are aligned with having more money. Okay. So again, like if I just go, look, I want to be a really capable entrepreneur, right? And ideally there's maybe someone or several people where it's like, I want to be like this, right?
Right.
Or have this image of I want to be this kind of person. And you know, this kind of person happens to be wealthy because entrepreneurship is a financially high leverage thing to do. That's how I think of it. And that's also how I think of it in terms of playing the money game, you know, with like investing and stuff like that. I don't think, if I invest my money into crypto, I'm going to be rich soon, right? I just have to pick the right dog coin or whatever. I think the way I think of it is, this is a blood splattered arena. Okay, almost everyone who enters here dies. Right? Almost everyone who tries this loses their money. Some people somehow are just like ice cold and have developed a set of skills and mindsets that allows them to step into this thing that allows them basically to put money in a machine that is designed to take away your money and win more often than they lose, right? And some people do this to a degree that is shocking. It is shocking how good they are at this, right? And I want to be one of those people, right? That is just, for me, you know.
That's badass.
Like in terms of investing, I'm pretty far from reaching the goals I have there. But for me, you know, I have this sense of what it looks like if I get there. And the reason it's exciting, the money is just an indicator that I got there. Right. See, look, let me put it this way. if, let's say, a friend of mine calls me up and says, dude, you got to put some money into this stock or this crypto or whatever. Trust me, bro, right? And I do it and it goes up 1,000x. Then I'd be like, well, that's nice to have this money, but I would be completely unsatisfied because I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I just lucked out. This guy gave it whatever. I didn't become a better person. I just made a lot of money somehow. So for me, that would just be like, I think that would actually be frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it's like
my greatest success is not my
exactly
because of me,
like how annoying. How annoying is that, right? So, so just to be clear, right? So I'm not just pursuing the money. I don't dream of doing the $1 million trade because I want $1 million. I dream of doing the $1 million trade because I want to be that guy.
Yeah, the kind of person.
Yes, I want to be that guy where it's like there's this, because in a way, right? If you win big at a trade, it is almost like you stepped into this thing. Almost everyone got killed, and you're standing here with the trophy somehow, right? And you've developed a system, or you developed a mindset, or you've churned through so much data, or whatever. There's many ways to get there, but every one of them is super, super hard. You somehow managed to compete everyone in this absolutely savage game, right?
Wow.
Like, I want to be that guy. That's what motivates me, right?
It's the champion.
Yeah.
Last man standing.
Yeah. So this is basically how I think about it, right? This is how I think about it.
Okay. The way this landed on me was like, so if you gave a money example, right? Mm-hmm. A more, I guess, general way, or at least the way I understood it, is like, identify the process that generates the outcome you want, right? Like any outcome you want is usually a byproduct of following a process.
Yes.
So in this case, it's like role modeling investors that you want to be like, and doing whatever it takes. I have no idea what it takes, but I see you looking at graphs all day, so it looks like a lot of fun. Okay, fair enough. So people who are struggling right now, at least the guys, to a certain degree, shut the fuck up and just do it, bro.
Well, engage in the struggle. I think that's, in a way, we've come out the other end, right? Where it's like, you should be struggling. You should be struggling. And engage in the struggle that makes you better, right? Engage in the struggle that makes you stronger.
So I think the main fear is, I hope I'm not struggling for
in
all
vain.
It to be pointless. In vain.
Yeah. So, and I think we've given the pointers for that, right? It's like, even though there's no guarantee, right? There's no one here, no one's coming to save you and tell you, oh, here's the exact thing to do, right? That is part of the struggle, is the uncertainty, right? Yeah. But I think we've given enough pointers where you can tell the difference between whether you're doing something useful or not, and whether you're struggling in vain or not. So the aim is to engage in the right kind of struggle.
And set up like your guideposts or whatever, so when to say, I'm done with this, or I'm not done with this, or I've arrived at a finish line, essentially, right? Yeah. Okay. And what would be, this is a question I always wanted to ask you. What would be advice you would give your own younger self? Like, there's no signs that you might become who you are today.
I mean, it depends on how young, right? It depends on where I'd encounter myself. But like, one of the things I'd probably just tell myself, like, look, I'd basically tell myself to jump in sooner. It's like if I met myself when I'm still hesitating, I don't know how to build a website, I'd be like, just start. It's fine, right? And it's the same, like I was floundering before I started creating my own products. I was like, I'd really like to create, write an ebook or create an online course or something, but I don't know if I can. Just do it. Just like do it now. You're ready now, because all you're doing is you're floundering in uncertainty. Then you finally do it and you realize, this is actually really cool and I'm actually kind of good at it. Or basically, or at least you do it often enough that you become good at it. Yeah. So it's like, you might as well do it now. You might as well start now. So I think that's,
as opposed to waiting until this. So you start where you are.
Yeah. So I think that, because look, of course, there's lots of stuff I could tell my younger self to like accelerate the process or whatever. But for the most part, like if I actually met my younger self, I'd be like, listen, you're actually doing great. Yeah. And if anything, I just want to like encourage you, just do the thing, right? Just do the thing. You're already like, you're hesitating to do the thing that you're going to do anyway. Just do it now.
Yeah. And I didn't mean like, oh, here's how to do the build the fucking business or whatever. That's not what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like no, just put all your money into Apple or something, right?
Yeah,
put all your money
true.
into Apple stock. Depends. But yeah, if it's like in terms of helping my own development, it would be that. Yeah, it's just
that's what I meant. Like to your struggling self, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And to anybody listening, like I know oftentimes this is a very lonely experience, right? Like you're struggling on your own and you kind of feel like a bitch to like admit it to someone else. Like it's like when somebody calls you and asks, hey, how's it going? You don't say, oh, dude, let me tell you. You know, it's, like, it's usually like, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
When we're not. But if you do want to engage with similar like-minded badass motherfuckers, right? ikario.com/join. We have a free community. And legitimately, man, there are some serious gangsters there where I look at them like, I wish I was like that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you exist because you're motivating the shit out of me right now.
Yeah. And I think in general, right, I think it's really good idea to seek out other people who are, engaged in the same thing. So one of the best things you can do as an entrepreneur is make sure that you know other entrepreneurs, right? That you have some entrepreneurs in your friend circle. Not even like just for like networking, right? Oh, business opportunity. No, just have other people with whom you can have that kind of chat. Oh, here's what's going on in my business. This is what I'm struggling with. And they go, oh yeah, I'm currently doing this, right? Just for that kind of solidarity. I think it's pretty important. Yeah.
And it feels cool. It feels cool. Like, oh man, I know people like that. That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
You feel good. Okay. Fair enough. In closing, do you have any other remarks? Any other Stoic words?
No, I think that's basically it, right? It's, you briefly mentioned the warrior archetype, right? I do think it's one of the things where you can look at that, because I think there's a lot of suffering in trying to avoid suffering. Right? There's a lot of suffering in trying to avoid the uncomfortable thing. And I think it's, lean into it. Do the right kind of struggling, do more of that kind of struggling. And I think, like I said, the starting point is like some of the questions people asked. I think you're on the right path. You're doing the thing. Like, if anything, do more of it.
Yeah. And just to cap that off, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality.
Yeah.
I think it was Seneca or someone.
One of these guys, yeah.
Yeah, one of those guys. Anyways, with that being said, thank you so much for your time.
All right. See you guys on the next one.